So what are some tools or resources that you personally use when you actually study the Bible and try to interpret it through hermeneutical principles? How you like that word, hermeneutical?
Hermeneutical, yes. So some tools I use Logos Bible software. I really enjoy
Oh, you're
it.
a Logos guy, huh?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Typically, people that don't enjoy Logos just haven't used it enough or have enough information on it. But, what do you use, sir?
I do not use Logos. Logos was
Oh.
so expansive, so much. I don't hardly use anything. I'm a simple guy. I use the Bible,
Yeah.
and I use Blue Letter Bible and a couple other things out there.
Yeah, and you can do that, and that works for sure. Me, I like searching every corner of every nook and cranny, and I can do that in 2 seconds with the Logos. So
with like 20 different windows everywhere.
Oh no, I'll teach you. I'll teach you one day, and you'll be thankful. If not, well, you'll still be thankful. No, anyway, but yeah, Blue Letter Bible is a good one. So Logos, depends on how you want to say it, if you want to do it correctly or not. Me, I don't know.
You're a Southerner.
Horribly ignorant, but I'm American, so I just say
you're
Logos.
You're not gonna French it up, huh?
No, not really. No, that's me pretending to be something other than I'm not. But there's a lot of other free resources out there. You can just pretty much Google and jump into whatever is out there. And I'll be honest, I could give a shout out to my mom, who's kind of like my spiritual cornerstone. So she started Logos or got the account. Gosh, so long ago, probably in the 90s.
Wow.
It was when it first kind of was hitting the stage, and we really were just, a revival kind of in our family. Of course, I was young, and but she got it, and it was very, old school and kind of hard to use. And anyways, but she got it, and over time, she never really used it. Like you were saying, there is a lot to it. But I picked it up. I was like, Mom, let me just jump into that. And then I got it, bought a package, didn't use it for probably another 3 years. And then took it, and now I'm all in it. So I'm grateful. It's funny how even that, looking back, helping me go through some of these seminary classes and really grow. Oh man, it's just crazy. It's just crazy. So, but yeah, I use Logos. It's really important though to dig in and have something. There's a lot of illustrated Bibles and dictionaries out there to where I'm going to tell you, those have helped immensely for me.
What do you mean?
Terms.
What do you mean?
So, illustrated Bibles, you can dig in, you can look up terms, passages, and it will actually illustrate, where it was. Like, so I was looking just the other day at the Bema seat, whether in Corinth, it showed like where it was it in the Faith Life and Logos. I'm second guessing how I'm enunciating it now, but it shows where people would walk up, where people would be sitting. It showed also different stalls in that city where Paul would have sold and done his tent making. It's really neat. So it brings it visually, but then the dictionaries also define a lot of terms. So but people need to realize even agricultural references. So if take the Bible out of it, but agriculturally even, if you look at it, the way people farmed in ancient days is far different than how we do it nowadays. You know what I mean? And looking at different things in our life, how we're impacted today because of our past, we can't lose sight of that. And with the Bible, there's many ways of doing it. The illustrated Bibles, the dictionaries, Concordance and Lexicon, those are pretty beneficial as well.
Could you elaborate a little bit about what differences between concordances and lexicons?
Yeah, so I've got a long way to go when it comes to, and I'm thankful for Logos and the good Lord when it comes to understanding lexicons and how the concordances tie together. But concordance, just in a very basic and way it functions, is it ties it together, almost acts as an appendix, you know, when you're reading through and you look at a certain passage and you want to see how it ties in with other passages or a word and where that word is utilized throughout the Bible, you can look at concordances and see how it falls in. There's a lot, there are many versions of concordances out there. There's some that are kind of mixed with the lexicons for languages and translations, but concordance is, you know, basic appendix that ties verses and words together to where you can reference and look them up. Lexicons kind of are a helpful tool to get us back with the original languages. So you can look at word usages. So if you look up abide or abiding, and you can pull that down, look at the original, and it'll show where it's at and what the meanings of those words are. So yeah.
Yes. No, definitely. The thing about concordances too is concordances tend to be based upon translation. So you can find an NIV concordance, you can find a New American Standard concordance, because it's really based upon the English word. Like you were saying, you know, to find that word and all the different verses it's used. But what's fascinating is you can take the word like love, for instance, and look in a concordance and say it's used all these times in these verses. But when you take the lexicon, which, like you were saying, takes it in the original language, it'll show you, okay, for all the different words for love, these are the Greek words. And then when you go into the lexicon, like you said, the outline of usage and the definitions and everything else, you can find, okay, for storge, for phileo, for eros, for agape, where are those specific types of love used? Because a lot of times we have our English translations, and I love the King James, but there are times where a word will be used, but in the original language, it's a totally different word used when it's mentioned twice, like, for instance, love. Love can mean phileo, brotherly love. It can mean agape love, that sacrificial and conditional love. But a lot of times in these translations, it's just the word love. And unless you really look into the original language, we wouldn't be able to understand that. It's a completely different Greek word.
Can I share my screen real quick?
Nope.
No?
Okay, of course you can. Yes, go
All right,
ahead.
let's do this. I'm gonna I think I'm doing this right. So
Yep.
Can you see that? All right. So this is logos, and this is a basic little guide right here. So I can get into it, and let me grab my, so abide, right?
Yep.
Or yeah, well, we'll just do abide for now. But you click abide, and what logos will do is it'll pull it out. And what's really cool about this is it'll show all the different places it's used. So right here, Hebrew, this is New American Standard. For my class, we were actually running through New American Standard at the time, but so it'll break it down. It shows all the Hebrew, help me, Danny, Hebrew words for, abide, is that right?
Yep.
But you can click on them, so you can click on just this ring, right, to where abide mentioned sit down, remain sitting, dwell, be inhabited, marry. So it will pull out the verses and show you, hey, these are using this this root word of abide. And when you drill down even further, it will break it down into the translation, and it'll show you within how often it was used in that instance. And you can keep going down with it, but it's extremely handy. You can go into stuff that like just will blow your mind, right? Like right here, it talks about inhabit. So you can go down from abide to inhabit and go, oh, what do they mean by inhabit? But you can gain a context of what they were meaning among the verses within the books, and it does it very quickly. So yeah, pretty handy. We'll go back to abide. Down here is the Greek, which is very interesting because there was a few different ways that, root words that were translated as abide in the Hebrew. Well, down here in Greek, it pretty much all of them are remain, stay, and reside. So it's pretty neat. And then you can go through and look at it in different aspects as well. But this is a unique way of looking at it and understanding what it is that the root words that you want to look up. So kind of handy. And then here you can look at the frequency as well. When was abide mentioned, right? And here's all of the different genres and instances that, it popped up. And for me, when I was going through hermeneutics, it was very helpful, and it really revealed, and, it gives you a landscape, just the visual of where it was mentioning about abiding. And it was extremely helpful. So anyway, but this is Logos. It's really not helpful whatsoever.
Looks very pretty.
Yeah, well, it works really well too. And you can click on it, go straight to the verse, Danny. Have you seen that? Look at that. It takes you right to the Bible. Anyway.
There you go. It does have the Bible in there.
It does. It does.
Root words are fascinating because root words, if we're stuck trying to figure out what the meaning of a word is, getting down to the root word can shed a little bit of light onto it and then to properly, accurately determine what that word means within its own context. So that's awesome. I use Blue Letter Bible, same thing. I just don't have all the pretty bar graphs and everything else. Plus Blue Letter Bible's free. It's not like $5,000. But
mine was not $5,000. So yeah. Don't throw that. I don't know if they're red herring. Don't throw that red herring out there. I don't know if that's proper.
It's not, but it's close enough.
Whatever. It's one of those fictitious circular reasonings that he throws out sometimes because he's smart. But
so, going back, would you say, is the Bible written to us? Or is it applicable to us? Could you maybe, what are your thoughts on that question? Is the Bible written specifically to us, or is it applicable to us? Or is it both, or is it none?
Yeah, so that's kind of an interesting, some people will get lost in, it almost seems like semantics, right? Is it written just specifically to us? Well, if you want to say that Paul, when writing the letter, wrote it to me, Woody, no, he was not. He did not put my address on there in Alabama and send it to me. No. So first you have to understand the question and ask clarifying questions if, to understand what people are asking, depending on the context of the conversation you're having. But yes, absolutely, it's applicable to us today. And you have to understand, and this is what's so cool about understanding language and how communication happens and how messages are sent. So first I would say, if you believe that God is in fact who he is, right, you have to come to terms with his ability to communicate a message. All right. I do believe that we can look at the living words in the Bible and understanding that, those that believe and have accepted Christ as their Savior and the promise he's given are indwelled by the Holy Spirit. And it cannot be understated, the illumination effect of a heart seeking truth, right? I won't get all into it, but it's just, there's illumination that happens. The words on a page are words on a page in any book, right? But how you read it, prayerfully seeking, the intent of your heart is big. So if you don't got that checkbox marked, you might struggle a little bit. You know what I mean? I remember reading the Bible and just, the act of reading the Bible, like I'm just going to read it and I'm just going to be, but over the years, I have seen that when I give it real effort, there's a different approach to it and a different yield based on that approach. But anyways, but this doesn't happen by accident, right? So when you read it and understanding what the words mean, you have to look at it. You have to come at it right. So I'm just trying to think of how I want to say this. It's not overly complex work, but you need to approach it in a way that, you still don't have your Xbox controller in your hand, right? So, people sometimes are, don't give it the time it deserves. We got to understand that there's only one interpretation. So there's one interpretation. Like, so Paul wrote a letter. What was he thinking? Who was he writing it to? he wrote multiple letters to different churches and different people. He did that because he was speaking in a certain context, in a certain way, addressing certain issues. But underneath that interpretation, there's multiple principles. And to know and pull out those principles is key. Because guess what we can do here today? We can take and apply principles to our lives. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So, you know, there is only one interpretation, but there's multiple principles within that we can apply to our life today. So, first off, I do not believe that God's limited in his ability to communicate and apply principles throughout multiple generations. So, yes, the words that Paul wrote, 100% applicable to me, based on the principles that come out of the interpretation that's there. And we, using hermeneutical methods to pull out the context of those words, that's our burden to bear. So we're only going to be as good with our applications and understand and have legit principles based on the quality of effort to understand that interpretation and that context. Anyways, that's just my thoughts.
Oh, it's definitely true. Also something to ponder. I wonder what your thoughts would be if it would be accurate to say the Bible was not written to us, it was written for us.
Yeah. It was written for us. It was written, and you know what's funny is
a lot of things are funny to you.
Yeah, I know. I see that a lot. It's just, I when I'm by myself and no one's around, I go, this is hilarious. This is just funny. You know, it's all around us. It's up to us to like grab a hold of it and make something of it. And all truth is God's truth. But all I'm getting at is, you know, the Bible is written for us. And the perspective, as you read the Bible, as you understand, and as I listen to like Pastor Ken or even some of your podcasts and all that, not all of them. No, I'm just kidding. Some of them.
Like we talked about that before. The Lord does what he wants.
Yeah. All I'm getting at though is the perspective changes. You know what I mean? Because when I was outside looking in and not really reading the Bible and doing things like I should and stuff, right. I was like, yeah, it was very easy for me to write it off. Like, oh yeah, that wasn't written to me or whatever. Mm-hmm. And it was enough to keep me from reading it. But then as I read it, I'm like, wow, all of this is highly applicable. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's funny how people chase down Aristotle, Socrates, Marcus Aurelius, and all these guys, right? And they go, oh yeah, this, I'm putting it on my bathroom mirror so I see it every day. And like, it's in my car and I'm going to memorize all this philosophy. Seriously? That's another flesh and bone, blood pumping muscle kind of human just writing based off of their, you know, it's not necessarily God inspired. Could God use that? Absolutely. But all at the end of the day, it's not canonical. It's just a philosopher, it's a human being on his hands and knees, you know, crawling around in the dark, you know, trying to find what life's about outside of the Bible and God's will. And, you know, it's just funny. So funny stuff.
Ecclesiastes talks all about that. Solomon has a lot to say. God says a lot through Solomon as far as trying to find purpose under the sun apart from God.
Yeah.
So that was pretty much the foundational questions as far as hermeneutics are concerned. Now we're going to jump a little more into more applicational stuff. Could you explain what the different contexts are as far as interpreting the Bible? I know there's a lot, so you don't have to touch on all of them, but what are the major contexts?
So what I found was there's so many different levels of context you can seek. And, you know, when I was going through hermeneutics, as probably you did too, I mean, we had to seek out, if Dr. Shea wanted to know who was ruling in that day. You know what I mean? He wanted to know what was the viticulture. I had to look up what viticulture meant. But we're talking about, you know, the vines and the branches and things like this. And he's like, I want to know What were those farming methods? You know, why did he mention vine and not bananas? You know, like, what was the whole point behind it? There's a point behind it. You can't go, oh yeah, he is the vine, we are the branches, and then totally go, they're talking about watermelons, you know, or they're talking about, you know, like, you just can't do that. You know what I mean? That right there poses a great visualization of how context has to be understood. Because if you applied it to something totally different, you would probably be questioning what the message was, because it wasn't decoded properly. But there's political, there's generational, culture, right? Culture plays big into it. Let's see, immediate surrounding the book. You know, what part of the Bible are you reading? What's happening? You know, is Israel in exile or not? You know, or what's going on? Was a harvest abounding with the people at that time, or were they starving? You know, I mean, people are going to get a different message, and you're going to write things differently based on your audience and what they're going through. Were they believers or unbelievers? My goodness, I'll say it again. It's funny, but it's just how I'll read some verses, right? Not trying to be like, I don't believe in Calvinism or Arminian, all this kind of stuff, right? It's not like I'm going out to just literally defeat them. You know, hermeneutics is about being objective, seeking truth, and it'll stand if it's truth, right? But when you read context, and the one piece of context is the audience, and are they believers or unbelievers, that changes everything. When you read the Bible and you go, wait a minute, so this doesn't apply to unbelievers, this applies to believers, or vice versa, they're speaking to unbelievers versus believers, it really does change the way it's being interpreted. So people got to get that right. You know, I mean, you have to understand and read words, because words matter. So the context really does matter. Anyway.
Yeah, it's very, I'm glad you brought that up, because when you read the book of James, it's clear that he's writing to Christians. He's writing to believers. So he's not questioning if they're saved or not saved. He's not questioning that. And so when he gets into James chapter 2, beginning in verse 14, he starts his passage about having a dead faith. Automatically we assume, okay, you don't have works and you have dead faith and you're not a Christian. Well, no, that's totally not what James is saying, because his audience, like you were saying, he's writing to Christians. And so he's not questioning their salvation. He's saying if they're not operating in their faith, if it's not affecting them to affect others, they have an inoperative, inactive, or in some regards, from a physical standpoint, a purposeless faith. Because while you see somebody in need, you just pray for them. You're not giving them what you could to help them with their physical needs. And so I'm glad you brought that up and everything. And like I said, there's a lot of different contexts out there. But the big thing is context is so crucial, whether it's immediate surrounding book, Bible context, cultural, historical, like you were saying, epoch, covenantal, and understanding. What's up?
And, you know, Danny, you look at cultural norms, just understanding cultural norms. You know, you're in the military, you know, you go to different countries, and anyone out there listening that's been to a different culture, country, or you know, if you don't know where people are coming from, and they come up and they start wanting to kiss you on the cheek, and you're like, what's happening? You know what I mean? Like, it's weird. Or you shake someone's hand and they want to just, you know, they want to take you out. Listen, you're sending a message, just like a book in context of literature is sending a message, except you're doing it in a very non-verbal, non-literal, you know, type of way. You have to understand that context. And, you know, I only mentioned that just to, you know, we've got to realize this, you know what I mean? And it's not about being scholarly. It almost boils down to common sense, you know? I mean, it's very practical. You've got to understand that, you know?
It's sad, but I was charged with reading too much into the text when I was talking about Matthew chapter 7 and by your fruits you will know them. And this guy was talking about, see, if you're a Christian and you don't have fruit, you don't have works, you're not a Christian. I was like, no, go back a few verses. He says what? Beware of what? False prophets. So this passage is about false prophets. What's a prophet? They claim to speak on behalf of God, give the oracles of God. So he says, beware of false prophets. By their fruit you will know them. I'm saying the fruit is the message that they claim God is giving, not the works that I do or don't do. No, man, you're reading too much into the text. I was like, dude, you're not reading enough into the text.
Yeah.
And so, like the old adage goes, you'll hear me say quite often on this channel, text without context is a pretext for a proof text. And so it is so important. Yeah. A pastor out here at one of the churches we were going to for a while named it the 20-20 rule. So in order to get a surrounding context, generally what you want to do is look at the first 20 verses before the verse and then the 20 verses after the verse. And that will give you a generally good surrounding context. 20-20 rule.
Oh, yeah. Talking about context, man, we were doing, what is it? John 15 and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Well, we were doing more than that. But Dr. Shea was like, you have to consider what you're committing to here. If you want to understand something, you need to read all of it. Yes, we pull out verses out of the Bible. It's a big book. But when you're reading a verse and you're actually reading it to understand it, he's like, what I expect you to do is start by reading the whole book of John. Mm-hmm. I want you to go through all of John. He goes, and it's a lot of words, but you know what? You'll sit down and watch a movie for 2 hours, and you'll say it's not even important. But this you're telling me is important. So go read John. Do that tonight before you go to bed. And it was already like 9 o'clock. He goes, get up in the morning, read it all over again. Then he goes, narrow down and then reread just that section. Mm-hmm. Jot down some thoughts, just thoughts, observations. And I'm like, man, it is very easy, but this is where the intention comes in. Like you're saying that, I mean, sure, 20-20, but man, read the whole book and then start zeroing in and gain that context. But anyway.
Exactly. And a lot of people just don't want to put the time and effort into it. Yeah. We'll spend time reading all these articles online or watching movies, like you said, but we won't put time into the Bible. And then so many people neglect the aspect of systematic theology. Whereas, you take the doctrine of angelology, the study of angels. Yep. Systematic theology looks at everything that Scripture has to say about angels. You look at it from a systematic, putting a puzzle piece together. And so whatever interpretation one has of John 15 or James chapter 2, not only in that passage do we have to see if it fits contextually, but we got to see, does it contradict systematically what that doctrine entails? And so that's another thing, Bible, books, surrounding media, everything. And so, we could spend a couple hours on this. But similar to context, could you explain what the different genres of the Bible are, whether between the Old Testament, New Testament, and what role does genres and understanding the genre play in accurately interpreting a passage?
Yeah. So earlier when I was sharing my screen with logos. Yeah. My wife always makes fun of me because, I don't know. She now knows. I was watching tons of videos on Logos, and I'll say, I was on Logos. I found this new way of studying or looking this up. She goes, you mean Logos? I'm like, come on, knock it off.
You got to do one of this. You'd be like, Logos.
Like Logos. I'm like, are you even listening to what I have to say? Instead of making fun. But she's awesome. So needless to say here, getting into genre, but when I was showing you that, there are different genres, right? There's poetry, there's different narrative. I'm going to say this with genre, different genres. When I was going through the course, Hermeneutics, and we were looking at different genres, it just really came to mind. I don't know if I heard it somewhere, but I just thought every foreground needs a background, right? So genres do that. And when you look at the Bible, the different genres in the Bible, these are so many different lives, so many different cultures, so many different generations, and how they interact with each other is pretty important to see and understand. Now, to understand them accurately, which is what we're talking about, you have to understand the genre, right? So if, is there a difference? I will tell you this. I'll ask you this. Is there a difference between the lady, is there a difference, Danny, between the lady when you're getting on a plane, you're going to go fly, is there a difference between the lady showing you how to fasten your seatbelt and tighten it, and then, oh, by the way, the exits are over there, and then down on the side? Is there a difference between that instruction and explanation and her words versus a smoke-filled plane, her screaming at you, telling you to get out the exit? Is there a difference in that genre?
Well, I wouldn't find myself caught on a plane since being done with the military now, and I don't have to ever fly again if I don't want to. But
there you go.
I would say, yeah, there is definitely a difference. And like you said, it's the area, the atmosphere and everything.
Yep. And you're going to interpret that different, would you? And it's going to drive you.
I'd be frantic.
You think, reason, differently in both scenarios. I normally put my earbuds in, and I may or may not be turning off my airplane mode. But anyway,
we flow so many times, right? We could give that speech ourselves.
Yeah, I was like, oh gosh, whatever. And so, yeah. But if there's smoke, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is bad. This is really bad. We got to get out of here. I would be heading to the exit and going. I bring that comparison up because of the genres in the Bible as well, all right? So to understand it accurately, and just to give just two little simple breakdowns. There's many genres, but narrative, right? Exodus, it's like a historical narrative of things that transpired all the way through, right? You look at prophets. Prophets are going to be different. You talk about Isaiah, Ezekiel. I mean, he was talking to Israel, going, hey, warning signs, like, hurry, pay attention. Do you realize what's going to happen? You are going to be judged. We went through Ezekiel, there was another one, Habakkuk, with the Chaldeans, I think it was, and them being raised up to take down and destroy. And it's like, there's so much emotion there, and things that go on, but the different genres speak to the context and the words that are given, you know what I mean? And being able to pick up on that and understand it will help you as far as the internal.
What do you mean by that?
What do you mean?
What do you mean by understanding the genre helps you understand the words and how to pick them up? And what do you mean by that?
So when I'm sitting there and I'm reading Exodus, right? It's a big book. It shows, the Exodus, plan, but no pun intended. But when you look at that, you can see where they were and where they had gone as far as going through the desert, dealing with Pharaoh, everything, all of it. And it sets the stage and sets a narrative of, you can almost, for me anyways, when I read it and when I hear it, it looks at history, a timeline of these things going through. Like I said, when we get into Ezekiel, that stuff's happening, man. Like, these people need to pay attention. It is more of that first person instead of third person view. And my reflection on it, so for instance, Exodus, I look at that book as a big timeline, and when I look at the beginning and end of that, it's a broader perspective. When I reflect and have looked at those instances where I'm reading through Exodus, I look at the grand scheme, and it sheds light in my own life, as far as applications and things. When I look at my life, with some of those prophets, I'm looking at it going, man, these guys are getting beat up because they weren't doing X, Y, and Z. Is there any principles I can pull out of this? Granted, I'm not getting invaded. My home is not getting invaded right now, but what can I pull out of it? New Testament. Let's go into the New Testament. There's Paul's letters, right, to the churches. Some of those are personal, right? Would you agree that they're like, he's like pouring out his heart to these folks that are either doing well or not doing well, and he's like correcting and encouraging and all these types of. So when I read those, I need to read those from the point of, hey, this is a personal epistle. This is Paul writing to a specific audience. He cares. He's passionate about. It's not like he's just going, oh yeah, so there's the Corinthians, and the Church of Corinth, and currently, you know what I mean? It's not like an overview, I guess.
No.
I don't know if I'm explaining it well, but like I said, this is demonstrating how simple of a character I am and how practical and at the beginning of being learned I am. So
learned. No, that's awesome, man. That's totally awesome and everything. One thing, I like to really mention as far as the importance of understanding genre is, and you had mentioned it earlier, is the fact of poetry is one of the genres. Wisdom is a genre as well. And we're not going to interpret, let's say, the Song of Solomon the same way we're going to interpret a Pauline epistle. Because in the Song of Solomon, there's parts where Solomon says that the bride has a nose like the Tower of Lebanon.
Yeah.
So would we literally believe that her nose was the size of a tower? Or was it simply a metaphor? There's a lot of similes and things like that. And so one thing I like to look at as far as genres and the very importance of genres, a lot of heresy, a lot of false teaching comes when we take certain genres and we apply literal interpretations to it. I've said this before, you probably heard me say it before, but if we read the book of Psalms, I can literally show you from a literal interpretation that God is a rock golem. Now, is that truly what God is? No. That's simply anthropomorphism. That's simply showing characteristics that we would be aware of to personify, if you will, God, give a mental picture of us. So it doesn't mean he's made of rock or that he is a tower or anything like that. It's using imagery. It's using metaphors, similes, things like that. And that breeds a lot of false interpretation and false application as well. So what's up?
I was going to, it was funny. So just to bring in some of that, because there is truth out there that, some secular philosophers come across. And, Aristotle was interesting in some of the things that he pulled out. But one thing that stuck with me that he had mentioned, right, was the least, he says, the quote goes, the least initial deviation from truth is later multiplied 1,000-fold. And it's so true when it comes to like genres and these contexts, just like you were saying, not understanding the genre. And people might be like, so what? It's a mystery. It's nonfiction, whatever. I don't care. I'm just going to read the book and enjoy it. That's not what it's about. You have to understand that genre to get it. It's like, I don't understand why everyone's trying to figure out what's going on. Well, you're reading the mystery, like that's why it's you're trying to figure. So just take it to regular, but it's true. The slightest little deviation from the very onset, by the time you go down that road, you might find yourself, someone walks up or you get on C4C and you listen, you're like, what? I can't be that far off. It's like, listen, bro, you kind of, when you started here, now you're 1,000-fold. You're way off, You got to check your trajectory and kind of correct in that objectivity. That hermeneutical method is what like ties you back into, keeping on track.
It's like land navigation with a hand compass. You're going to want to try to find the direction that you're wanting to go, and you're trying to mark a point in that direction about 50 yards out. Then once you get there, then you try to find that direction again, mark a point, and walk to that point. Else, if you're just wanting to walk east and you're just going to use the compass, okay, that way's east. Though you might slowly deviate from there, once you get 100 miles, now you're like that far away. And so that's very important that you brought that up.
Upset. If I punched in my GPS, just thinking about it, because my brain just goes. But if I punched in my GPS, I wanted to go into Prattville, right? And I followed it. I followed my GPS, but I'm in Selma. Like, that's weird. Like, doesn't that not bother you? That would bother me. You know what I mean? So you can't, we demand that things are accurate and we have such high standards of everything around us. but yet when we do our own little like reading and things, our intention and efforts are, you know, lackluster, I would say. Not saying we don't have good intent. I don't want people to be mad, like, oh, whatever, like you're personally offending me. I had to do a lot of, you know, refiner's fire in my own life going, gosh, I'm not doing this right. And yeah, so it does take effort.
Yes, it does.